The war chest is empty, and every eye in the great hall turns toward Elena Voss. She stands frozen near the healing table, her hands still stained with dried herbs from the wound she treated only an hour ago. The Alpha's voice cracks through the silence like a whip, and she does not understand, at first, that he is speaking about her. Marcus Kane stands at the top of the stone steps, his shoulders squared, his jaw tight. Beside him, Celine watches with a stillness that should have warned Elena years ago. But Elena has never been good at seeing danger in people who smile at her. "The gold is gone," Marcus says again, slower this time, as though the words themselves are difficult to hold in his mouth. "Every coin meant for our warriors. Every coin meant to keep this pack alive through winter." Elena steps forward. Her voice shakes, not from guilt, but from the sheer disbelief rising in her chest. "Alpha, I don't understand why you are looking at me." Celine's hand rests lightly on Marcus's arm, a small, practiced gesture of comfort. "Because your key was found in the vault door, Elena. Because the guards saw you near the treasury 2 nights ago. Because no one else in this pack has debts the way you do." Every word lands like a stone. Elena's debts are real, yes, small ones, owed for medicine she bought to treat pack members who could not afford their own care. But those debts are nothing compared to the accusation now hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. "I was near the treasury because old Garrick was ill," Elena says, turning toward the elder who sits near the back of the hall, his eyes downcast. "Garrick, tell them I brought you medicine that night." Garrick does not lift his eyes. He mumbles something about being confused, about not remembering clearly, and Elena feels the floor tilt beneath her feet. She realizes, with a slow and terrible clarity, that fear has already spread through the pack. No one wants to stand against whatever story has already taken root in Marcus's mind. "I did not take the gold," Elena says, louder now, her voice cutting through her own fear. "I have served this pack for 11 years. I've treated every wound, every fever, every difficult birth. Ask anyone who I am." Marcus does not answer right away. His eyes, the eyes she has loved in silence for so long, refuse to meet hers. And that, more than anything, tells her how this will end. "The vault key was in your possession," he says finally. "The guards found gold dust on the hem of your dress. I have no choice but to believe the evidence in front of me." "Because it was placed there," Elena says. "Someone wanted this to look exactly the way it looks." Her gaze flicks, just once, to Celine. And in that single fraction of a second, Celine's mouth curves, so faintly that only someone watching very closely would notice it. Elena notices, but knowing the truth and proving it are 2 very different things, and there is no time left to find proof. "Elena Voss," Marcus says, and his voice takes on the formal, cold tone reserved for pack law. "For the theft of pack resources, meant for the protection of our warriors, you are stripped of your title and your place among us. You are banished from this territory, effective immediately." The words hit her like physical blows. Around her, pack members she has healed, fed, comforted through nights of grief, look away. No one speaks in her defense. No one dares. "Marcus," she says, forgetting formality entirely, using his name the way she used to when they were younger, before the weight of leadership hardened him into someone she barely recognizes. "Please, look at me. You know me." For one moment, something flickers behind his eyes, something that looks almost like doubt. But Celine tightens her grip on his arm, murmuring something too quiet for Elena to hear, and whatever softness had begun to surface disappears completely. "Take her belongings," Marcus orders the guards standing near the doorway. She leaves within the hour. Elena is escorted from the hall, her hands trembling, her mind refusing to accept what is happening. She passes familiar faces, familiar walls, the healing room where she has spent countless nights saving lives that mattered to no one else but her. None of it protects her now. In her small quarters, the guards watch as she gathers what little she is allowed to take. A cloak, a worn bag, a few herbs she manages to slip into her pocket when no one is looking. Everything else, everything she has built in this place, is left behind. Outside, the sky has turned the color of a bruise, purple and gray, threatening rain. The pack gathers at the edge of the territory to witness her exile, some out of duty, some out of curiosity, a few, she can tell, out of genuine sorrow they are too afraid to express. Marcus stands at the front of the crowd. He does not step closer. "You were the best healer this pack has ever known," he says, and for a moment his voice softens, just slightly, just enough for her to hear the man beneath the alpha. "I wish this had ended differently." "So do I," Elena answers, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "But wishing does not make you innocent of what you have done to me today." She turns before he can respond, before the tears can betray her further, and walks toward the tree line that marks the border of the only home she has ever known. Behind her, she hears murmurs rising among the pack, quiet arguments breaking out about whether justice has truly been served. She does not turn back to hear them. There is nothing left to hear that will change what has already happened. The forest swallows her whole within minutes, the canopy blocking what little light remains in the sky. Her legs carry her forward out of instinct alone, her mind still trapped in the great hall, replaying every word, every accusation, every moment she could have fought harder and did not. She thinks of Celine's small, satisfied smile. She thinks of Garrick's downcast eyes. She thinks of Marcus, the man she loved from a distance for years, who chose evidence over the years of trust they had built together. By the time exhaustion forces her to stop walking, night has fully claimed the forest. She finds a hollow beneath the roots of an old oak tree and curls into it, pulling her cloak tight around her shoulders. The cold seeps into her bones, but it is nothing compared to the cold spreading through her chest. She does not cry, not at first. She simply sits in the darkness, staring at nothing, trying to understand how 11 years of loyalty could be erased in a single afternoon by a lie clever enough to wear the shape of truth. When the tears finally come, they come all at once, silent and relentless, shaking her shoulders as she presses her face into her knees. She allows herself this one night to grieve everything she has lost, her home, her purpose, the man she once believed might someday see her as more than the pack healer. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the hollow, a twig snaps. Elena's head lifts sharply, every instinct sharpening at once. Exiled wolves are vulnerable in ways she has never had to consider before. No pack protection, no allies, nothing but her own wits standing between her and whatever moves through the shadows. She holds perfectly still, listening. The sound does not repeat. Perhaps it was only a deer, or the wind shifting branches. But the fear it stirs reminds her of the new reality she now inhabits, one where every sound could mean danger, where every stranger could be a threat. She does not sleep that night. She watches the darkness instead, her back pressed against the tree roots, her senses straining for any sign of movement. Exhaustion eventually blurs the edges of her vision, but she forces herself to stay alert, knowing that survival now depends entirely on her own vigilance. As dawn begins to break through the branches above, painting the forest in pale gray light, Elena finally allows herself to think beyond the immediate fear. She has no pack, no protection, no home, but she still has her skills, her knowledge of healing, the years of training that no accusation can take from her. She thinks of the map she once saw hanging in the Alpha's study, the borders of neighboring territories marked in careful ink. To the north lies hostile ground, packs known for turning away strangers without mercy. To the east, smaller territories struggling with their own conflicts, unlikely to welcome an unknown wolf with open arms. To the south, though, lies a kingdom whispered about in cautious tones throughout every pack she has ever known. Ashvale, ruled by a king known only as Ruthless, a wolf whose reputation for strength in conflict has traveled far beyond his own borders. Some say he shows no mercy to those who cross him. Others whisper that he simply refuses to tolerate weakness or dishonesty within his walls. Elena has never had reason to travel near Ashvale before, and everything she has heard about its ruler fills her with unease. But unease is a luxury she can no longer afford. She has no home to return to, no pack willing to shelter her, and winter is not far away. She rises from the hollow, her body stiff and aching, and begins walking south, following the faint trail she remembers from the map. Every step takes her further from everything familiar, further from the pack that cast her aside, further from Marcus, whose face still lingers painfully behind her eyes. As the sun climbs higher, she allows herself one final thought of the life she has lost. She thinks of the healing room, the herbs drying along the windowsill, the quiet satisfaction of watching a patient recover under her care. She thinks of the nights she spent awake, tending fevers, delivering babies, stitching wounds from training accidents and border skirmishes. None of it mattered in the end. Loyalty, skill, years of service, all of it dismissed in a single afternoon because someone wanted a convenient target and found one in her. She does not know, as she walks deeper into unfamiliar territory, that the very reputation which fills her with dread is about to become the reason her life changes forever. She does not know that the ruthless king, so many fear, will soon look at her not with suspicion, but with something far more dangerous to the life she thought she understood. For now, she only knows the ache in her legs, the emptiness in her stomach, and the long road stretching ahead of her, leading toward a kingdom that offers no promises, only the faint possibility of survival. The forest grows denser as the day wears on, the trees taller, the light dimmer even at midday. Somewhere beyond these woods lies the border of Ashvale territory, and beyond that, a fate Elena cannot yet imagine, one shaped by a king whose name alone is enough to make grown warriors lower their voices in caution. She keeps walking, her resolve hardening with every step. Whatever waits for her beyond these trees cannot be worse than what she has already survived. She tells herself this again and again, using it like a shield against the fear creeping steadily into her chest as the shadows around her grow longer and the unfamiliar sounds of a new territory begin to rise around her in the fading light. 3 days pass before Elena sees another living soul, and by then, hunger has become a constant companion, gnawing at her stomach with every step. She has learned to find what edible roots she can, to boil water from streams before drinking it, to sleep in short bursts with one ear, always listening for danger. The forest has taught her, in a short time, how fragile survival truly is without the safety of a pack. On the third night, she hears voices. She freezes among the trees, pressing herself against the rough bark of an ancient pine, and listens. The voices belong to men, 3 of them by the sound of it, their words slurred with drink, their laughter sharp and mocking. Rogue wolves. She has heard enough stories to know what that means. Wolves without packs, without laws, without the restraint that comes from belonging to something larger than themselves. She considers turning back the way she came, but the voices seem to be moving in her direction, drawing closer with every passing minute. Her heart pounds against her ribs as she calculates her options. Running blindly through unfamiliar terrain in the darkness is dangerous. Staying still and hoping they pass by is equally risky. A branch snaps somewhere to her left, far too close to be accidental. Elena's breath catches in her throat. "Well now," a voice says, low and amused, cutting through the darkness. "Look what wandered into our woods." She turns to find a tall man stepping out from between the trees, his eyes reflecting faint moonlight, his posture relaxed in a way that somehow makes him more dangerous, not less. 2 others emerge behind him, flanking her position, cutting off any hope of escape. "I don't want trouble," Elena says, keeping her voice as steady as she can manage. "I'm only passing through." "Alone," the first man says, tilting his head, studying her the way a predator studies wounded prey. "No pack mark, no protection. That's a dangerous way to travel, little healer." She realizes he can smell what she is, can sense the faint traces of herbs and medicine that cling to her clothing even now. It offers her no comfort. If anything, it seems to interest him further. "I have nothing worth stealing," she says, backing away slowly, though she already knows there is nowhere to go. "Maybe not," he agrees, taking a step closer. "But you have skills. Skills a pack like ours could use. Come with us, and we'll make sure nothing bad happens to you out here in these woods." The offer is not really an offer at all, and Elena understands this immediately. The false kindness in his voice does nothing to hide the threat beneath it. She glances quickly between the 3 men, gauging distance, gauging her own exhausted, hungry body against wolves who look well-fed and well-rested. "I decline," she says, forcing steel into her voice despite the fear pulsing through her veins. The man's expression shifts, the false friendliness draining away entirely. That wasn't really a question. He lunges forward, and Elena reacts on pure instinct, twisting away and running deeper into the trees, ignoring the branches that tear at her cloak and scratch across her arms. Behind her, she hears the men give chase, their laughter now replaced with something far more predatory. Her legs burn with exhaustion, her lungs aching for air she cannot fully catch, but she does not stop, does not dare to slow down even for a moment. The forest blurs around her, shapes and shadows merging into an indistinct mass as she pushes herself faster than she has ever run before. A root catches her foot, and she stumbles hard, catching herself against a tree trunk just before she falls completely. The delay costs her precious seconds, and she can hear the men gaining ground behind her, their footsteps heavy and certain against the forest floor. She does not know how much further she can run. Her body has already been pushed to its limits over the past 3 days, and now it demands more than she has left to give. Panic claws at the edges of her thoughts as she forces herself onward, refusing to surrender to the fear threatening to freeze her in place. The trees begin to thin ahead of her, moonlight spilling more freely onto the forest floor, and she realizes she must be approaching some kind of clearing or border. She has no idea what lies beyond it, but anything feels better than facing the men behind her. She bursts through the last line of trees and stumbles into open ground, her chest heaving, her vision swimming from exhaustion. Ahead of her stands a tall stone marker, carved with symbols she does not recognize, clearly denoting some kind of territorial boundary. Behind her, the footsteps slow, then stop entirely. "She's crossing into Ashvale land," one of the men mutters, his voice suddenly cautious in a way it had not been before. "Forget her. It's not worth the risk." Elena does not fully understand what this means, but she does not waste the opportunity it presents. She forces her exhausted body forward, crossing the stone marker and continuing into the unfamiliar territory beyond, refusing to look back until she is certain the men have truly abandoned their pursuit. When she finally stops, several minutes later, her legs give out entirely, and she collapses onto the cold ground, her entire body trembling from exertion and lingering fear. She allows herself only a moment to catch her breath before forcing herself upright again, aware that stopping for too long in unfamiliar territory carries its own dangers. The land around her looks different from what she left behind, the trees more orderly somehow, as though someone maintains this forest with deliberate care. She walks cautiously, her senses straining for any sign of danger, uncertain what kind of welcome, if any, awaits a stranger within Ashvale borders. She does not have to wonder for long. Figures emerge from the trees ahead of her, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that speaks of extensive training. 4 warriors, their postures alert, their eyes sharp with suspicion as they take in her disheveled appearance, her torn cloak, the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Identify yourself,"
Identify yourself,
one of them says, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "You've crossed into Ashvale territory without permission." "My name is Elena Voss," she says, too tired to summon much fear, beyond what already lives permanently in her chest. "I mean no harm. I was being pursued by rogue wolves, and crossed your border without realizing it." The warriors exchange glances, some silent communication passing between them that Elena cannot interpret. "Rogue wolves don't cross into Ashvale land," the same warrior says. "They know better." "I didn't know that when I ran," Elena admits. "I only knew I needed to escape them." One of the other warriors steps closer, studying her more carefully. "No pack mark," he observes. "Exiled then." Elena does not deny it. There is no point in lying about something so easily detected by wolves, trained to notice such details. "Yes, exiled 3 days ago." "For what crime?" The question lands heavily, and Elena feels the familiar wave of injustice rising in her chest. "A crime I did not commit. Theft from my pack's treasury. I was framed, though I could not prove it before my alpha made his decision." The warriors do not respond immediately to this claim, their expressions unreadable. Elena understands that her words mean very little to strangers who have no reason to trust her, no way of verifying anything she says. "You'll need to come with us," the first warrior says finally. "Trespassing into Ashvale territory, regardless of circumstance, must be reported. The king will decide what happens to you. Elena's stomach tightens at the mention of the king, every rumor she has ever heard about the ruler of Ashvale rushing back into her mind at once. Ruthless. Merciless. A man who tolerates no weakness within his borders. I understand, she says, because there is truly no other option available to her. She has no strength left to run, no pack to return to, no alternative path forward, except whatever awaits her within this kingdom's walls. The warriors escort her deeper into the territory, and as they walk, Elena takes in her surroundings with cautious curiosity. The land is well tended, the paths clearly marked, everything organized with a precision that suggests strong, capable leadership, regardless of the cruelty rumored to accompany it. Eventually, the trees give way to the sight of a fortress rising in the distance, its stone walls tall and imposing against the darkening sky, torches lining the ramparts like scattered stars brought down to earth. Elena has never seen anything quite like it. A stronghold built not just for defense, but for permanence, for the kind of unshakable authority that does not need to prove itself through cruelty alone. Her legs, already exhausted from days of walking and running, nearly give out again as they approach the fortress gates. One of the warriors notices her stumble and, to her surprise, offers a steadying hand rather than simply letting her fall. "Save your strength," he says, not unkindly. "You'll need it." Elena does not know exactly what he means by this, but the warning settles uneasily in her chest as the massive gates begin to open before them, revealing the inner courtyard of a kingdom she never intended to enter, ruled by a king whose reputation has followed her every step of the way through this unfamiliar and unforgiving territory. She takes a deep breath, steadying herself as best she can, and steps forward into whatever awaits her beyond those gates, knowing there is no path left, except forward, no home left to return to, only the uncertain future stretching out ahead of her within the walls of Ashvale. The courtyard inside the fortress walls is larger than anything Elena has ever seen, torches burning steadily along stone pathways, warriors moving with quiet purpose between buildings that seem to serve every function a kingdom might need. She feels impossibly small within it, a stranger dragged into a world built on strength she has never had to measure herself against before. The warriors lead her toward the largest structure at the center of the fortress, its entrance flanked by two massive doors carved with images of wolves in mid-battle. Elena's stomach twists with nerves as they approach, every rumor about the ruler of this kingdom pressing heavily against her already fragile composure. Inside, the great hall stretches before her, tall columns rising toward a ceiling lost in shadow, torchlight flickering against stone walls lined with banners bearing the Ashvale crest. At the far end, seated upon a throne that seems carved from the mountain itself, sits the man Elena has heard whispered about in cautious tones throughout every territory she has ever known. Damien Ashvale does not rise as they enter. He simply watches, his dark eyes tracking her every step with an intensity that makes her want to look away, though something in her refuses to give him that satisfaction. His presence fills the hall in a way that has nothing to do with volume, and everything to do with the quiet, absolute authority radiating from him. "A trespasser, my lord," the lead warrior announces, bowing slightly before straightening again. "Found crossing the southern border, fleeing rogue wolves. Claims she was exiled from her pack under false accusation." Damien's gaze does not waver from Elena's face. "Does she have a name?" "Elena Voss," Elena answers before the warrior can speak for her again. Something about allowing others to describe her feels wrong, especially here, especially now, when so much already hangs in uncertain balance. A faint, almost imperceptible shift crosses Damien's expression, gone before Elena can fully interpret it. "You speak for yourself. Good. I have little patience for those who cannot." He rises from his throne then, descending the few steps toward the hall floor with unhurried, deliberate movement. Up close, he is even more imposing than he appeared from a distance, tall and broad-shouldered, his features sharp and unreadable, carrying the weight of a man who has faced war and emerged from it harder, not weaker. "Tell me your story," he says, stopping several feet away, close enough that Elena feels the full weight of his attention, far enough that she does not feel immediately threatened. "Every detail. I will decide for myself what to believe." Elena hesitates only briefly before speaking, aware that her survival may well depend on how convincingly she can explain herself to a stranger who owes her nothing. She tells him everything: the missing gold, the planted evidence, Celine's quiet, satisfied smile, Marcus's cold judgment delivered before the entire pack, her banishment into unfamiliar territory with nothing but the clothes on her back. Damien listens without interruption, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts. When she finishes, silence stretches between them, heavy and uncertain, as Elena waits to learn her fate at the hands of a king whose mercy, according to every rumor she has ever heard, is in short supply. Marcus Kane, Damien says finally, and something dangerous flickers behind his eyes at the mention of the name. I know of him. You know my former alpha? Elena asks, surprised despite everything else occupying her thoughts. I know of him, Damien corrects. Our territories have never been friendly. He has made choices over the years that I have found disappointing, at best. He studies her for a long moment. It would not surprise me to learn he made another poor choice in your case. Elena is not certain whether to feel relief at this small validation, or renewed caution at the calculating look that has entered Damien's eyes as he speaks. She senses, without fully understanding why, that his interest in her situation extends beyond simple sympathy for her circumstances. What do you intend to do with me? She asks, because waiting for him to decide without knowing the possibilities feels unbearable. Damien's mouth curves, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to one. That depends. What can you offer this kingdom, Elena Voss, beyond the story you've just told me? I am a healer, she says, straightening despite her exhaustion. Trained for 11 years. I have treated wounds from battle, illness, difficult births, poisoning. I know herbs most healers overlook. I do not lose patience easily. Something in Damien's expression shifts again at this, more noticeable this time, genuine interest, replacing the careful neutrality he has maintained throughout their conversation. My kingdom has suffered heavy losses recently, in an ongoing conflict along our eastern border. My healers are stretched thin, and good ones are difficult to find. Then perhaps I can be useful to you, Elena says, sensing an opportunity forming amid the uncertainty of her situation. Perhaps, Damien agrees, though his tone remains carefully measured. Understand this, Elena Voss. I do not offer trust easily, and I do not tolerate deception within my walls. If you prove capable and honest, you will have a place here. If you prove otherwise, you will regret ever crossing my border. I understand, Elena says, meeting his gaze directly despite the warning clear in his words. Good. Damien turns toward one of the warriors standing nearby. Take her to the healing quarters. Let Master Aldrich assess her skills himself. If she is truly capable, she begins work immediately. The warrior nods and gestures for Elena to follow, and as she turns to leave the hall, she feels Damien's gaze remaining on her, steady and considering, until she passes through the great doors and out of his direct line of sight. Something about that lingering attention unsettles her, though she cannot quite name why. The healing quarters, when she reaches them, occupy a long stone building near the eastern edge of the fortress, filled with the familiar scents of herbs and medicine that immediately ease some of the tension in her shoulders. An older man with graying hair and sharp, assessing eyes looks up as she enters, his expression skeptical. Another stray the king has brought in, he mutters, though not unkindly. Let's see what you actually know then. Master Aldrich spends the next hour testing her knowledge relentlessly, asking about herb combinations, wound treatment, fever management, the proper handling of infection. Elena answers each question with growing confidence, drawing on years of experience that no false accusation can strip away from her, regardless of what has been taken from her elsewhere. By the time the questioning ends, something in Aldrich's expression has shifted from skepticism to grudging respect. You know your craft, he admits, better than most who come through these doors claiming similar skill. We can use someone like you, especially with the losses we've been taking along the border. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Elena says, and she means it more deeply than she expected to, given how uncertain her arrival in this kingdom had felt only hours earlier. Don't thank me yet, Aldrich says, already turning to gather supplies. We have wounded soldiers arriving within the hour. You'll earn your place here through work, not gratitude. Elena rolls up her sleeves, grateful for purpose after days of aimless survival, and follows Aldrich deeper into the healing quarters, ready to prove herself in the only way she has ever truly known how, through the steady, careful work of saving lives that others might otherwise lose. As the hours pass, and wounded soldiers begin arriving from the eastern border, Elena loses herself in familiar rhythms, cleaning wounds, setting bones, calming frightened young warriors who have never faced real conflict before this. The work exhausts her further, but it also grounds her, reminding her of exactly who she is, beneath the injustice that stripped her of everything else. Word of her skill spreads quickly through the healing quarters and beyond, soldiers speaking of the new healer with the steady hands and calm voice. The woman who arrived as a stranger, but works as though she has always belonged among them. Elena does not know, as she moves from patient to patient late into the night, that her growing reputation has already reached the ears of the king himself, who listens to reports of her work with far more interest than he allows himself to show openly. By the time exhaustion finally forces her to rest, curled on a narrow cot within the healing quarters, Elena allows herself a small, cautious feeling she has not experienced since her banishment, something close to hope, fragile and uncertain, but present nonetheless, growing quietly within the unfamiliar walls of a kingdom she never expected to call home, ruled by a king whose reputation for ruthlessness has, so far, shown her nothing but a strange, careful kind of fairness she did not expect to find. Morning arrives too quickly for Elena, the ache in her shoulders a reminder of how many hours she spent tending wounds through the night. She rises from the narrow cot in the healing quarters and finds Aldrich already awake, sorting through supplies with the same brisk efficiency he showed the previous evening. "You worked well last night," he says without looking up, which Elena has already learned is his version of high praise. "The king will want a report on the wounded. Come with me." Elena follows him through the fortress corridors, still adjusting to the scale of the place, the way sunlight falls through narrow windows onto polished stone floors, the quiet efficiency of servants and warriors moving about their duties. Everything here operates with a precision that feels almost military in nature, nothing wasted, nothing left to chance. They find Damien in a smaller chamber adjoining the great hall, bent over a table covered in maps marked with symbols Elena does not fully understand. He looks up as they enter, his expression unreadable as always, though something in his eyes sharpens slightly when he sees Elena standing beside Aldrich. "Report," he says simply, addressing Aldrich first. 12 wounded treated through the night," Aldrich says. 3 critical cases stabilized that I doubted would survive until morning. The new healer's work, mostly. She has skill I have not seen since I was young myself. Damien's gaze shifts fully to Elena now, studying her with the same intensity he showed during their first meeting, though something in it has shifted subtly, curiosity layered over the careful assessment from before. 3 critical cases stabilized. Explain. Elena straightens, unaccustomed to explaining her methods to someone of such authority, but finding, once she begins, that the familiar rhythm of discussing healing steadies her nerves considerably. Infection had already begun spreading in 2 of the wounds. I used a combination of herbs to slow it while cleaning the wounds properly, something many healers skip in favor of speed. The 3rd case involved significant blood loss. I focused on stabilizing circulation before attempting to close the wound fully. "And you learned these methods where?" Damien asks, leaning back against the table, his arms crossing over his chest. "From my former Pax healer, who trained me from a young age," Elena says, "and from years of practice afterward, treating everything from training injuries to the aftermath of border conflicts." "The same pack that exiled you," Damien says, something dry entering his tone. "The same pack," Elena confirms, unable to keep a small note of bitterness from her voice. Apparently 11 years of service means little when a convenient lie presents itself. Damien's expression does not change, but Elena notices his jaw tighten slightly at her words. "Marcus Kane's loss then, my kingdom's gain, if your work continues as it began last night." "I intend for it to continue exactly that way," Elena says, meeting his gaze steadily despite the intimidation his presence still inspires in her. Something almost like approval flickers across Damien's face before he turns his attention back to the maps spread across the table. Aldrich, see that she has proper quarters, not simply a cot among the wounded. If her skill is what you claim, she should not be exhausting herself sleeping in the same room she works in. Yes, my lord, Aldrich says, already turning to leave, clearly accustomed to receiving and following such orders without question. Elena moves to follow him, but Damien's voice stops her before she reaches the door. Elena, stay a moment. She turns back, uncertain what to expect, watching as Damien straightens from the table and studies her with renewed focus. Yesterday you spoke of a bargain, offering your skills in exchange for a place here. I want to be clear about what that place will mean. I'm listening, Elena says, bracing herself for whatever conditions he intends to impose. You will not be a servant here, Damien says. You will be a healer of this kingdom, respected for your skill, and compensated fairly for your work. In return, I expect complete honesty from you, always, regardless of how difficult the truth might be to share. That seems a fair exchange, Elena says, somewhat surprised by the generosity of the terms, given everything she has heard about his reputation. Fair, Damien repeats, something almost amused entering his voice. You expected worse. I expected far worse, Elena admits honestly, deciding there is little point in pretending otherwise. Every story I have ever heard about Ashvale paints its king as merciless, ruthless, someone who shows no consideration for those who serve him. Damien's expression grows harder at this, though not, Elena senses, out of anger directed at her. Rumors serve their purpose. They keep weak enemies from testing my borders, and keep those within them working diligently, rather than growing complacent. But cruelty for its own sake has never interested me. I reward competence and loyalty. I punish deception and weakness. You have shown me neither weakness nor deception since your arrival. Only exhaustion, Elena says, allowing a small, tired smile to cross her face for the first time since her exile began. Something shifts in Damien's expression at this, the barest hint of warmth breaking through his usual careful reserve. Exhaustion is easily remedied with proper rest. Something you will receive, starting tonight, in quarters befitting your position here. Elena nods, grateful, despite the lingering uncertainty she still feels about her place within this unfamiliar kingdom. Thank you, my lord. Damien, he corrects, surprising her. When we speak privately, you need not use formal titles. I find them tiresome from those whose judgment I have come to respect. The offer feels significant, though Elena cannot fully articulate why, and she nods again, filing away the small gesture of trust as something to consider more carefully once the exhaustion of the past days has fully lifted from her mind. As she turns to leave, Damien speaks again, his voice quieter this time, more measured. Elena, the pack that exiled you, the false accusation that led to your banishment. I do not forget injustice easily, especially when it involves a rival alpha whose judgment I have long questioned. If evidence exists to prove your innocence, I intend to find it. Elena turns back, startled by the unexpected offer. Why would you concern yourself with clearing my name? I am simply a healer you have taken into your service. Because injustice within my borders or beyond them offends me equally, Damien says, though something in his tone suggests his reasons run deeper than simple principle alone. And because Marcus Kane has long been a rival, I would not mind seeing humbled, should the opportunity present itself honestly. Elena studies him carefully, trying to determine how much of his offer stems from genuine concern for her situation, and how much stems from political advantage against a rival territory. She cannot fully separate the two, and perhaps, she realizes, it does not matter. Either way, the possibility of clearing her name, of proving her innocence to the pack that discarded her so easily, offers a fragile thread of hope she had not allowed herself to consider until this moment. I would be grateful for any help you can offer, she says finally, choosing honesty over pride, as she has promised to do. Then consider it done, Damien says, already turning back toward the maps spread across his table, the conversation apparently concluded from his perspective, though Elena leaves the chamber with far more to consider than she arrived with. The following days settle into a steady rhythm within the fortress. Elena works alongside Aldrich each morning, treating wounded soldiers and tending to illnesses among the fortress residents, her skill earning quiet respect from those who initially viewed her with suspicion as an outsider, with no proven loyalty to the kingdom. Her new quarters, though modest, feel luxurious compared to the narrow cot she occupied during her first night in Ashvale. A private room with a proper bed, a small window overlooking the training grounds below, space enough to finally begin processing everything that has happened to her since her exile began. She sees Damien only occasionally during these early days, brief encounters in the corridors, formal reports delivered during larger gatherings, moments that feel insignificant on the surface, but that Elena finds herself thinking about more than she expects to, turning over his words, his careful attention, the strange promise he made regarding her innocence. She does not yet know that Damien has already begun quiet inquiries into the situation surrounding her exile, using contacts within neighboring territories to gather information that Marcus Kane's pack would never willingly share. She does not know that the ruthless king so many fear has found, in her steady competence and quiet resilience, something he did not expect to encounter within the walls of his own fortress, something that occupies far more of his thoughts than political advantage alone would explain. For now, Elena focuses on the work in front of her, grateful for purpose, for shelter, for the fragile beginnings of a life rebuilding itself from the ruins of everything she lost. Whatever else may come, whatever Damien's true intentions might eventually reveal themselves to be, she allows herself, for the first time since her banishment, to believe that survival might eventually become something more than mere endurance. Weeks pass, and Elena's place within Ashvale grows steadier with each passing day. The healing quarters no longer feel like unfamiliar territory, but like something closer to a professional home. The herbs and supplies arranged now according to her own preferences, the rhythm of treating patients settling into something almost comfortable, despite the constant stream of wounded arriving from the eastern border conflict. She has learned the names of the soldiers she treats most often, young men and women who have grown to trust her steady hands and calm reassurance during moments of pain and fear. Among them is a young warrior named Oliver, barely past his 18th year, who arrived with a severe leg wound weeks earlier and has slowly regained his strength under Elena's careful attention. "You saved my leg," Oliver tells her one afternoon, testing his weight on the limb with careful steps around the healing quarters. "Master Aldrich said I would have lost it without your treatment." "You healed yourself mostly," Elena says, though she allows herself a small measure of pride at his recovery. "I simply gave your body what it needed to do the rest." Oliver grins, clearly unconvinced by her modesty. "The other soldiers talk about you, you know. They say the king brought in the best healer this kingdom has seen in years." Elena feels warmth rise in her cheeks at this, uncertain how to respond to praise she has not received so openly since long before her exile. "The king exaggerates, I'm sure." "He doesn't exaggerate much," Oliver says, his expression growing more serious. "Everyone knows that about him. If he says something is true, it usually is." Elena considers this as she continues her rounds through the healing quarters, checking on other patients, changing bandages, mixing fresh remedies for those still recovering from their injuries. She has noticed over these past weeks that Damien's reputation among his own people differs significantly from the fearful whispers she heard before arriving here. His soldiers speak of him with genuine respect, not the forced deference born of fear alone, but something closer to loyalty freely given. Her thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, breathless from running, seeking Aldrich urgently. "Skirmish at the eastern border," the messenger announces. "Casualties incoming within the hour. Significant numbers, from what the scouts report." The healing quarters erupt into organized chaos as Elena and Aldrich prepare for the arriving wounded, laying out supplies, clearing space, readying themselves for what promises to be a difficult night. Elena has grown accustomed to such moments during her time in Ashvale, the sudden shift from quiet routine to urgent, focused work that demands every ounce of her skill and attention. The wounded begin arriving soon after, carried on makeshift stretchers by exhausted soldiers, their injuries ranging from minor cuts to severe wounds requiring immediate attention. Elena moves quickly among them, assessing severity, directing others toward the patients requiring the most urgent care, losing herself entirely in the demanding rhythm of triage and treatment. Hours pass in this manner, the healing quarters filled with the sounds of pain and the quiet, steady voices of healers working to ease it. Elena barely notices the passage of time until she looks up from stitching a deep wound to find Damien himself standing near the entrance, his expression grim as he surveys the scene before him. He does not interrupt her work, simply watches with the same careful attention she has noticed from him before, until she finishes the stitches and moves the young soldier onto a cot to rest. Only then does he approach, his voice low enough not to disturb the other patients nearby. "How many did we lose?" he asks, and Elena hears genuine weight in the question, the burden of leadership evident beneath his controlled exterior. "None so far," Elena says, allowing herself a moment of relief as she says it. "Several critical cases, but all stabilized. Aldrich and I have managed to save everyone brought to us tonight." Something in Damien's shoulders relaxes slightly at this news, though the tension in his jaw remains, a reminder that the losses of this conflict extend beyond simple numbers into the lives of people he clearly feels responsible for protecting. "You've done remarkable work since your arrival," he says, his gaze moving across the healing quarters, taking in the organized efficiency Elena has helped establish over these past weeks. "My kingdom is fortunate you crossed our border, whatever circumstances brought you here." "I'm grateful for the chance to prove myself useful," Elena says, meaning it more deeply than the simple words convey. "After everything I lost, having purpose again means more than I can properly express." Damien studies her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his dark eyes. "You have more than proven yourself useful, Elena. You have proven yourself exceptional." The words settle warmly in her chest, and she finds herself unable to meet his gaze fully, uncertain how to receive such direct praise from a man whose reputation suggested he offered such things rarely, if ever. "Thank you, Damien." His name, spoken so casually between them now, feels significant in a way Elena cannot quite articulate, a small marker of the trust that has grown steadily between them since her arrival in this kingdom. "I have news regarding the situation with your former pack," Damien says, his tone shifting into something more businesslike, though Elena senses careful consideration beneath the change. "My inquiries have uncovered information suggesting your accusation was indeed orchestrated, though I do not yet have proof solid enough to present formally." Elena's heart quickens at this news, hope and apprehension mingling together as she considers what this might mean. "What have you learned?" "Whispers, mostly, from contacts within Kane territory," Damien says. "Suggestions that Celine, your Alpha's cousin, had motives beyond simple ambition in seeing you removed from the pack. I intend to continue investigating until I have proof solid enough to bring before Marcus Kane himself." "Why go to such trouble for me?" Elena asks, the question she has wondered since his initial offer weeks earlier finally finding voice. Damien's expression grows thoughtful, considering his answer carefully before speaking. "Because I have watched you these past weeks, Elena. I have seen your skill, your dedication, the quiet strength you carry despite everything taken from you unjustly. A person like that deserves to see justice served, regardless of what it costs to achieve it." The sincerity in his voice leaves Elena momentarily speechless, the careful walls she has maintained since her exile softening slightly under the weight of his attention. "That means more to me than you know," she finally manages. "Rest now," Damien says, his tone gentling further as he glances around the healing quarters, most of the wounded now settled and resting under Aldrich's continued watch. "You have given everything you have tonight. Allow yourself recovery as well." Elena nods, suddenly aware of the deep exhaustion settling into her limbs now that the urgency of the evening has passed. As she moves toward her quarters, she finds herself replaying Damien's words, the promise of continued investigation into her exile, the unexpected warmth in his voice as he spoke of her dedication and skill. She does not yet understand the full depth of what is growing between them, does not yet recognize the careful, deliberate way Damien has begun making space for her within his kingdom, within his considerations, within thoughts that extend far beyond simple political advantage against a rival territory. But something has shifted since her arrival in Ashvale, something neither of them has yet spoken aloud, growing steadily beneath the surface of formal titles and careful professional distance. As she finally settles into her bed that night, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep despite the whirlwind of thoughts occupying her mind. Elena allows herself to consider, for the first time, that perhaps her exile has led her not toward continued misfortune, but toward something she never expected to find, a place where her worth is recognized, not despite her circumstances, but through the genuine skill and character she has carried with her all along. Outside her window, the fortress settles into quiet nighttime stillness, the wounded resting, the soldiers standing careful watch along the walls, and somewhere within the great hall, Damien Ashvale sits alone with his thoughts, considering a healer who arrived as a stranger and has, in the span of only a few weeks, become someone whose presence within his kingdom he finds himself unwilling to imagine losing. The next several weeks bring a subtle but undeniable shift in the rhythm of Elena's days. Damien begins visiting the healing quarters more frequently, his reasons varied and often thin, checking on wounded soldiers, discussing supply needs with Aldrich, but Elena notices, with growing certainty, that his visits coincide most often with the hours she herself is present. She does not mention this observation aloud, uncertain what to make of it, though it settles into her chest with a warmth she has not felt in longer than she cares to admit. After the coldness of her final months with Marcus, watching him grow increasingly distant even before her exile, Damien's steady, deliberate attention feels almost unfamiliar, a kindness she must remind herself to trust rather than question. One evening, as the healing quarters empty of all but a few resting patients, Damien arrives carrying a small wrapped bundle, setting it on the table where Elena has been organizing herbs for the following day's work. "What is this?" she asks, curiosity replacing her initial surprise at his unannounced visit. "Open it," Damien says, something almost nervous in his usually composed demeanor, an expression Elena has not seen from him before. She unwraps the bundle carefully to find a collection of rare herbs, several varieties she recognizes as difficult to source, valuable both for their healing properties and their scarcity. "Where did you find these?" "A trading caravan passed through the southern villages last week," Damien explains. "I remembered you mentioning, during one of your reports to Aldrich, that these particular herbs were difficult to obtain in our region. I thought they might prove useful." Elena stares at the herbs, then at Damien, genuinely moved by the gesture. "You remembered a passing comment I made weeks ago, and sought these out specifically?" "I pay attention to what matters," Damien says simply, though something in his voice suggests the admission costs him more than his casual tone implies. "Thank you," Elena says softly, carefully gathering the herbs to store properly. "This will make a significant difference in treating certain infections. You didn't need to go to such trouble." "I wanted to," Damien says, and the directness of the statement hangs between them, charged with meaning neither of them quite acknowledges openly. Elena finds herself studying him more closely than she typically allows, noticing details she has perhaps deliberately avoided focusing on before. The way exhaustion sometimes shadows his eyes after long days managing the kingdom's affairs, the rare, genuine warmth that enters his expression during these quiet moments between them, so different from the controlled authority he presents to the rest of his court. "You work too hard," she says, before she fully considers the words, surprised by her own boldness. Something like amusement flickers across Damien's face. "I could say the same of you. Aldrich tells me you barely rest, even when the healing quarters grow quiet." "There is always something requiring attention," Elena says, though she recognizes the fair point in his observation. "Perhaps we could both benefit from occasionally setting aside our responsibilities," Damien suggests, something careful in his tone that Elena recognizes, with sudden clarity, as an invitation rather than a simple observation. "What did you have in mind?" she asks, her heart beginning to beat faster, despite her attempts to maintain composure. "The training grounds are quiet this time of evening," Damien says. "I sometimes walk there, when the weight of the day grows heavier than I would like. Perhaps you would join me tonight, rather than returning immediately to your quarters." Elena considers the invitation only briefly before nodding, recognizing the significance of what he is offering, a chance to know him beyond the formal exchanges of king and healer that have defined their interactions until now. They walk together through the quiet fortress corridors, the evening air cool against Elena's skin, as they emerge onto the empty training grounds, moonlight casting long shadows across the packed earth, where soldiers spend their days honing their skills. This place feels different at night, Elena observes, taking in the peaceful stillness so different from the clash and shouts that typically fill this space during daylight hours. It's one of the few places within these walls where I can simply exist, rather than constantly performing the role expected of me, Damien admits, something vulnerable entering his voice that Elena has not heard from him before. As king, there is little room for uncertainty or weakness. Everyone looks to me for strength, for decisive leadership, for answers I do not always possess with the confidence they assume I carry. Elena studies him in the moonlight, seeing past the formidable reputation to the man beneath it, someone who, despite his power and authority, carries burdens not so different from anyone else forced to shoulder responsibility for others' well-being. I understand that more than you might expect. As a healer, people look to me the same way, expecting certainty, even when the outcome remains uncertain, expecting strength, even when exhaustion threatens to overwhelm me. Perhaps that's why I find myself drawn to your company, Damien says quietly, turning to face her fully now, moonlight illuminating the careful sincerity in his expression. You understand burdens most others cannot fully comprehend. The admission settles between them, charged with meaning Elena has felt building for weeks, but has not allowed herself to fully acknowledge until this moment. Damien, she says softly, uncertain how to navigate feelings she has not permitted herself to examine too closely since her exile. I know this may seem sudden, Damien says, closing some of the careful distance between them, and I understand if the wounds from your past make trust difficult to extend so soon. But I want you to know, Elena, that my regard for you has grown into something beyond simple appreciation for your skill as a healer. Elena's breath catches at the honesty in his words, at the careful vulnerability he allows her to see, so different from the guarded formality he presents to the rest of his kingdom. I have felt something growing between us as well, she admits, the words feeling both terrifying and freeing to speak aloud. Though I confess uncertainty about trusting such feelings again, given everything that happened with Marcus. I would never ask you to trust blindly, Damien says, only to allow the possibility that not every wolf who claims to care for you will ultimately choose evidence over loyalty, judgment over understanding. The comparison, though gentle, strikes Elena deeply, and she finds herself nodding, allowing herself to consider, for the first time since her banishment, that perhaps healing extends beyond physical wounds into places she has not yet permitted herself to examine. I would like to allow that possibility, she says finally, meeting his gaze steadily, despite the vulnerability the admission requires. Something in Damien's expression shifts entirely then, the careful reserve he maintains breaking into genuine warmth that transforms his features into something far softer than the ruthless reputation attached to his name. Then perhaps we might continue these evening walks, not simply as king and healer, but as something closer to what I find myself hoping we might become. Elena smiles, the first genuine, unguarded smile she has allowed herself since her exile began. I would like that very much. They continue walking together through the quiet training grounds, conversation flowing more easily now that the careful tension between them has found some measure of acknowledgement, and Elena finds herself, for the first time and longer than she can properly remember, allowing herself to imagine a future built not on the ruins of what she lost, but on something new entirely, something growing steadily within the walls of a kingdom she never expected to call home. Meanwhile, unknown to either of them in this quiet, hopeful moment, Damien's investigators continue their careful work within Kane territory, gathering fragments of evidence that will soon bring the truth of Elena's exile fully into the light, evidence that will not only clear her name, but will expose a betrayal far deeper and more calculated than either of them yet fully understands. The morning arrives with unexpected news, a rider from the northern trade routes, requesting urgent audience with the king, claiming information vital to matters within Kane territory. Elena learns of the visitor's arrival, while tending to patients in the healing quarters, word spreading quickly through the fortress that something significant has finally surfaced regarding the investigation Damien has quietly maintained for weeks. She finishes her morning rounds as swiftly as professional care allows, her thoughts consumed by anticipation as she makes her way toward the Great Hall, uncertain whether she has been summoned or whether her presence would even be welcome during such proceedings. She need not wonder long, as a guard intercepts her partway through the corridor. The king requests your presence, the guard informs her. Immediately, if you're able. Elena's heart quickens as she follows the guard toward the great hall, uncertain what news awaits her, but recognizing the significance of being included in whatever discussion is about to unfold. Inside, she finds Damien seated at the head of a long table, a nervous-looking man standing before him, clearly the messenger who arrived earlier that morning. Elena, Damien says as she enters, gesturing for her to join him at the table. This is Felix, a trader who moves frequently between territories, including Caneland. He has brought information relevant to your situation. Elena takes the seat beside Damien, her attention fully focused on the trader as he begins to speak, his voice carrying the careful hesitance of someone uncertain how his information will be received. My lord, healer, I trade regularly with guards stationed near the Cane treasury. One of them, a young guard named Edwin, has grown increasingly troubled by something he witnessed the night the theft occurred. Go on, Damien says, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension Elena can sense building beneath his composure. Edwin was on duty that night, Felix continues. He saw someone near the vault, someone who was not the healer accused of the crime. He recognized the figure clearly enough, but fear kept him silent when questioned afterward, fear of what might happen should he speak against someone connected to the Alpha's own family. Elena's breath catches, understanding immediately what this implies. Celine? Felix nods slowly. He would not speak the name directly to me, fearing consequences even from a distance, but his description left little doubt in my mind. He said the figure moved with familiarity through the treasury halls, someone who clearly knew the layout intimately, someone with access others would not normally possess. Would this guard be willing to testify formally to what he witnessed? Damien asks, his voice carrying the careful precision of someone already calculating how this information might be used most effectively. Perhaps, Felix says carefully, though he would need assurance of protection. He fears retaliation should his testimony reach Celine or those loyal to her within the pack. Damien's expression hardens with quiet determination. I can offer that protection, should he agree to speak formally before witnesses. This information alone, while significant, requires stronger confirmation before it can be used to clear Elena's name conclusively. Elena listens to this exchange with growing hope, tempered by cautious realism, understanding that a fearful guard's second-hand account, however promising, may not yet constitute the solid proof needed to overturn Marcus's judgment against her. What would you suggest as next steps? She asks, directing her question to Damien. I will send trusted representatives to speak with this guard directly, Damien says. If he agrees to provide formal testimony, and if his account holds under careful questioning, we will have grounds strong enough to bring before Marcus Cane and demand a formal reconsideration of your exile. And if he refuses to testify, out of fear? Elena asks, unable to fully suppress the worry coloring her voice. Then we continue searching for additional evidence, Damien says firmly. I do not intend to abandon this pursuit, simply because the first path forward presents difficulty. Your innocence deserves to be proven beyond any doubt, Elena, regardless of how long that proof takes to secure. The determination in his voice steadies Elena's nerves considerably, and she finds herself grateful, once again, for the unexpected ally she has found within this kingdom, someone willing to invest significant effort into righting a wrong that, by any reasonable measure, was never his responsibility to correct. Felix departs soon after, promising to return with word once contact has been made with the guard in question, and Elena remains in the great hall with Damien, the weight of the morning's revelations settling heavily around them both. Thank you, Elena says softly, once they are alone, for pursuing this so relentlessly, even when the path forward remains uncertain. You deserve nothing less, Damien says, his gaze steady and warm as it meets hers. And I confess, my reasons extend beyond simple concern for justice alone. Marcus Cane's failure to properly investigate your accusation before condemning you speaks to weaknesses in his leadership that I have long suspected exist. Exposing this injustice serves multiple purposes, clearing your name while demonstrating clearly to other territories the difference between leadership built on hasty judgment and leadership built on careful consideration. Elena considers this admission, recognizing the political calculation woven through his genuine care for her situation, though she finds she cannot fault him for it. Rulers, she understands now, more clearly than she did during her years within Kane territory, must often balance personal conviction against strategic advantage, and Damien's willingness to be honest about both motivations only deepens her trust in him. "Whatever your full reasons," she says, "I am grateful nonetheless. This pursuit of truth matters more to me than I can properly express, not simply for the sake of clearing my name, but for finally having someone believe in my innocence enough to fight for proof of it." "I believed in your innocence from nearly the moment you arrived," Damien says quietly. "Your character speaks clearly enough to anyone willing to look past hasty accusations and truly observe who you are." The sincerity in his words moves Elena deeply, and she finds herself reaching across the small distance between them, taking his hand in a gesture that feels both natural and significant, given the careful boundaries they have maintained until recently. Damien's fingers close around hers, warm and steady, and for a long moment, neither of them speaks, simply allowing the quiet connection between them to settle into something solid and undeniable. "Whatever happens with this investigation," Damien says finally, "know that your place here in Ashvale does not depend on proving your innocence to Marcus Kane or anyone else. You have already proven your worth here, through your skill, your dedication, your character. The truth of what happened in Kane territory matters for your peace of mind, and for justice rightfully served. But it does not determine whether you belong within these walls." Elena feels tears threatening at the unexpected depth of reassurance in his words, the acknowledgement that her worth exists independent of external validation from the pack that discarded her so carelessly. "That means more to me than you likely realize," she says softly. They remain together in the quiet hall for a while longer, the investigation into her exile now set firmly into motion, the growing bond between them settling into something neither of them feels the need to rush or force into definition beyond what feels natural and true. Elena leaves eventually to continue her duties within the healing quarters, but she carries with her a lightness she has not felt since long before her banishment began, hope finally taking root, alongside the connection growing steadily between herself and the king so many others fear, but whom she has come to know as someone capable of both strength and genuine, careful tenderness. 2 weeks pass before Felix returns, this time accompanied by a nervous young man Elena recognizes immediately as belonging to Kane territory, his posture uncertain, his eyes darting anxiously around the unfamiliar surroundings of the Ashvale Great Hall. This must be Edwin, the guard whose testimony could finally provide the proof needed to clear her name. Damien receives them formally, offering Edwin assurances of protection and fair treatment before allowing the young guard to speak. Elena watches from her seat beside Damien, her heart pounding with anticipation, as Edwin finally begins recounting what he witnessed the night of the theft. "I saw Celine near the treasury that night," Edwin says, his voice growing steadier as he speaks, perhaps drawing courage from the assurances Damien has offered. "She moved through the halls with the confidence of someone who belonged there, someone with legitimate access. I did not think much of it at the time, given her position within the Alpha's family. It was only afterward, when the healer was accused, that I began to question what I had witnessed." "Did you see her near the vault itself?" Damien asks, his voice carrying careful precision. "Yes," Edwin confirms. "I saw her exit the vault chamber shortly before the gold was discovered missing. She carried something small wrapped in cloth, though I did not think to question her at the time. Guards do not typically question those connected so closely to the Alpha." Elena's chest tightens with a mixture of vindication and renewed anger as she listens to this confirmation of what she has known all along. "Would you be willing to state this formally, before witnesses, including my former Alpha himself?" Edwin hesitates, clear fear still evident in his expression. "I fear what Celine might do in retaliation, should I speak against her so directly. You will have my protection," Damien says firmly, "and Marcus Kane's own sense of justice, once presented with clear evidence, should ensure your safety regardless of Celine's influence within the pack." Deception of this magnitude, once exposed, typically strips the guilty party of whatever power they previously held. Edwin considers this for a long moment before finally nodding, his resolve strengthening beneath Damien's steady reassurance. "I will testify formally, if it means clearing an innocent woman's name. Elena feels tears of gratitude threatening as she listens to this commitment, the path toward proving her innocence, finally solidifying into something concrete, rather than fragile hope alone. "Thank you," she says softly. "I know this decision carries real risk for you." "Justice matters more than my comfort," Edwin says simply, and Elena finds herself moved by the quiet courage in his words. Courage that will soon play a crucial role in exposing the truth Marcus refused to properly investigate weeks earlier. With Edwin's testimony secured, Damien moves quickly to formalize the evidence, having his own scribes document the guard's account in careful detail, corroborating it against Felix's earlier information and additional inquiries his investigators have gathered over recent weeks. Within days, a clear and compelling case has formed, one that leaves little room for doubt regarding Celine's guilt and Elena's complete innocence. "The evidence is solid," Damien tells Elena one evening, as they review the gathered documentation together within his private study. "Enough to bring before Marcus Kane and demand formal reconsideration of your exile." "What happens now?" Elena asks, though she suspects she already knows the answer given Damien's careful, deliberate nature. "I will request a formal summit," Damien says, "a gathering of regional alphas, where this evidence can be presented publicly, ensuring Marcus cannot simply dismiss it privately or bury the truth to protect his own reputation and Celine's standing within his family." Elena considers the implications of such a public exposure, understanding both the justice it would provide and the significant political consequences it would create for Marcus and his entire pack. This will humiliate him thoroughly, before all his peers. He earned that humiliation the moment he chose hasty judgment over careful investigation, Damien says, though his tone carries less anger than simple, measured conviction. Leaders who fail their people so completely deserve the consequences that follow such failures. Elena nods, recognizing the truth in his words even as complicated feelings continue to surface regarding Marcus, the man she once loved deeply despite his ultimate betrayal. "I want the truth exposed," she says finally. "Whatever consequences follow for Marcus and Celine, I want my innocence proven beyond any possible doubt." "Then it will be done," Damien says firmly, already beginning to draft the formal request that will summon regional alphas together for a summit unlike any Elena has witnessed during her years within pack politics. As preparations for the summit continue over the following days, Elena finds herself spending increasing time alongside Damien, their bond deepening steadily amid the shared purpose of finally securing justice for the wrong done against her. One evening, as they walk together through the quiet fortress gardens, moonlight casting silver light across blooming flowers Elena has grown to appreciate during her months in Ashvale, Damien stops suddenly, turning to face her with unusual gravity in his expression. "Elena," he says, his voice carrying careful weight, "before we depart for the summit, there is something I wish to do, something that has been growing in my heart since nearly the moment you arrived within these walls." Elena's breath catches at the seriousness in his tone. "What is it?" "I wish to formally claim you as my mate," Damien says, the directness of the declaration settling powerfully between them. "Not simply as a healer within my kingdom, not simply as someone I hold deep affection for privately, but publicly, permanently, before my entire court, and soon, before the assembled alphas at this summit." The weight of the offer takes Elena's breath away entirely. Months of growing connection between them finally crystallizing into something undeniable and permanent. "Damien, are you certain? This is not a decision to make lightly." "I have never been more certain of anything," Damien says, closing the distance between them, his hand rising to gently cup her face. "You arrived in my kingdom as a stranger, wrongfully exiled, carrying nothing but your skill and your resilience. In the months since, you have proven yourself not simply capable, but exceptional, someone whose strength and character I find myself unable to imagine my life without. I want the world to know that you are mine, protected, valued, cherished beyond measure." Elena feels tears finally spilling freely down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the depth of sincerity in his words, so different from the hesitant, uncertain affection Marcus offered her during their years together, affection that ultimately proved too fragile to withstand a single convenient lie. "Yes," she says softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I accept your claim, Damien. I choose you, as you have chosen me." The formal marking ceremony takes place the following evening, before Damien's assembled court, warriors and healers, and servants alike, gathering to witness the king, claim the woman who arrived among them as an exile, and has since become someone essential to the kingdom's strength and spirit. Elena stands proudly beside Damien, as he speaks the formal words binding them together, her heart finally settling into a sense of belonging she feared she might never experience again after her banishment from Kane territory. As the ceremony concludes, and the court erupts into celebration, Elena catches Damien's gaze across the gathered crowd, seeing in his expression the same profound joy and certainty she feels within her own chest. Whatever awaits them at the upcoming summit, whatever consequences unfold once the truth of her exile is finally exposed before Marcus Kane and his assembled peers, Elena knows now, with unshakable certainty, that she has found something far more valuable than simple justice. She has found a home, a partner, and a love built on truth and mutual respect, rather than convenient assumptions and hasty judgment. The following morning, preparations begin in earnest for the journey toward the summit. Damien's warriors readying themselves to escort their king and his newly claimed mate toward a confrontation that will finally bring Elena's long pursuit of justice to its conclusion, exposing truths that Kane territory has managed to conceal for far too long. The journey toward Kane territory takes 3 days, Damien's escort moving with disciplined efficiency across the same lands Elena once crossed alone, exhausted and frightened, fleeing rogue wolves with nothing but a worn cloak and whatever herbs she managed to save. The contrast between that desperate journey and this one, surrounded by loyal warriors and riding beside the king who claimed her as his mate, is not lost on Elena as familiar landmarks begin appearing along their path. By the time they reach the summit grounds, a neutral territory where regional alphas traditionally gather to settle disputes and discuss matters affecting multiple packs, Elena's nerves have grown taut with anticipation. She has not seen Marcus since the day of her exile, has not stood before the pack that once claimed her loyalty, since she was cast out with nothing but accusations trailing behind her. The summit hall, larger even than Damien's own great hall, fills gradually with representatives from surrounding territories, alphas and their advisors taking their designated positions around a massive circular table, designed to ensure no single leader holds a position of dominance over the others. Elena stands beside Damien, her posture straight, despite the nervous energy coursing through her, aware of the curious glances directed her way, as word spreads regarding her presence and her new position as the Ashvale King's mate. Marcus arrives among the last of the assembled alphas, and Elena's breath catches as their eyes meet across the crowded hall for the first time since her banishment. Something flickers across his expression, surprise perhaps, or uncertainty, quickly masked by the careful composure expected of alpha leadership during formal proceedings. Celine accompanies him, as expected, though Elena notices, with grim satisfaction, the barely concealed unease beneath her cousin's carefully maintained expression as she takes in Elena's presence, standing confidently beside a king whose reputation for uncovering truth and delivering consequences has clearly reached even Celine's ears. The summit proceedings begin formally, various territorial matters addressed methodically before Damien rises, requesting the floor to address a matter of significant importance to justice within the region. The assembled alphas grant him attention immediately, his standing among them ensuring careful consideration of whatever concern he intends to raise. Several months ago, Damien begins, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed hall, a healer named Elena Voss was exiled from Kane territory, accused of theft from her pack's treasury. I stand before you today with evidence proving this accusation was entirely false, orchestrated by someone within the Alpha's own family to eliminate a perceived rival. Murmurs ripple through the assembled leaders as Damien's words settle into the hall, and Elena watches Marcus's expression shift from confusion into something approaching alarm as he processes the implications of what is being publicly declared before his peers. This is a serious accusation, Marcus says, rising from his seat, his voice carrying the authority Elena remembers well from her years within his pack, though something in it now sounds less certain than she recalls. What evidence supports such a claim? Damien gestures, and Edwin steps forward from where he has waited quietly among Damien's escort, his nervousness evident, but his resolve steady as he approaches the center of the hall. This guard witnessed Celine near your treasury the night of the theft, exiting the vault chamber shortly before the missing gold was discovered. He can testify formally to what he witnessed. Edwin recounts his testimony clearly before the assembled alphas, his account matching precisely what he shared previously within Ashvale's Great Hall, his courage steadying further as he speaks. Despite the weight of accusation his words carry against someone connected so closely to his own alpha's family. Celine's composure finally cracks visibly as Edwin finishes speaking, her expression shifting rapidly through denial. Then something closer to panic as she recognizes the solidity of the evidence now presented before witnesses who cannot be easily dismissed or silenced. "This is absurd," Celine says, though her voice lacks the confident authority it once carried. "This guard's testimony proves nothing. I had legitimate reasons to be near the treasury that night." "Then perhaps you can explain," Damien says, his voice carrying cold precision, "why gold matching the exact amount stolen was recently discovered in a private account you maintain outside pack knowledge, an account my investigators uncovered during their inquiries into this matter." The hall falls into stunned silence at this revelation, and Elena watches Celine's face drain of color entirely, her carefully constructed innocence finally crumbling beneath evidence too substantial to explain away with denial alone. Marcus turns toward his cousin, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror, as the full weight of the deception becomes clear to him. "Celine, tell me this is not true." Celine says nothing, her silence speaking volumes to everyone gathered within the hall, confirming through her failure to deny what words alone could not have concealed regardless. "I framed her," Celine finally admits, her voice barely audible, though it carries clearly through the hushed silence of the summit hall. "I wanted her removed from the pack. I saw the way you looked at her, Marcus, the way you trusted her judgment over mine. I could not bear watching her position within your regard grow while mine diminished." The confession lands like a physical blow throughout the hall, and Elena feels a complicated mixture of vindication and lingering sorrow as she watches Marcus absorb the full truth of what happened, the betrayal not simply against her, but against the pack he swore to lead with fairness and careful judgment. "You allowed an innocent woman to be exiled," Marcus says, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger, "because of jealousy over my regard for her." "I did what I believed necessary," Celine says, though the words carry little conviction now that her deception stands fully exposed before the assembled leaders. Marcus turns toward Elena then, his expression carrying genuine anguish as the full weight of his failure settles upon him. "Elena, I am deeply sorry. I should have investigated more thoroughly before condemning you. I should have trusted the years of loyalty you demonstrated, rather than accepting circumstantial evidence so readily." Elena studies him for a long moment, recognizing the sincerity in his apology, while also recognizing how completely her feelings for him have shifted during her months in Ashvale, healed and transformed by the genuine trust and partnership she has found with Damien. "Your apology comes too late to undo the damage already done," she says finally, her voice steady despite the emotion coloring the moment. "But I accept it, for whatever peace that offers you." "Return to the pack," Marcus says, something almost desperate entering his voice. "Your position as healer remains yours should you wish to reclaim it. Your name will be cleared formally before the entire territory." Elena feels Damien's hand find hers, steady and reassuring, as she considers Marcus's offer, an offer that, months ago, might have meant everything to her. Now, standing beside the man who believed in her innocence from nearly the moment they met, who fought relentlessly to secure proof of what Marcus refused to properly investigate, the offer holds far less appeal than Marcus likely anticipates. "I have already found where I belong," Elena says, her voice carrying quiet, unshakable certainty as she meets Marcus's gaze directly. "Ashvale is my home now, and Damien is my mate. Whatever happened between us in the past, Marcus, I have built something in Ashvale that I do not intend to leave behind." The hall falls silent at this declaration, the assembled alphas witnessing not simply the exposure of a grave injustice, but the quiet, powerful strength of a woman who has transformed her exile into something far greater than the life she was forced to leave behind. Marcus stands motionless for a long moment, following Elena's declaration, the weight of everything he has lost through his own hasty judgment, settling visibly across his features. Around the summit hall, the assembled alphas watch the unfolding scene with careful attention, understanding they are witnessing something significant, a reckoning not simply for Celine's deception, but for the failure of leadership that allowed such deception to succeed so completely. "I understand," Marcus finally says, his voice heavy with regret that Elena recognizes as genuine, even as she remains firm in her decision. "I have no right to ask anything further of you, Elena, given everything my failure cost you. I only hope you find the happiness and respect in Ashvale that this pack failed to provide you, despite years of loyal service." "I have found exactly that," Elena says, her voice softening slightly, recognizing that closure, for both herself and Marcus, requires acknowledgement rather than continued anger. "I do not carry hatred toward you, Marcus. I carry disappointment and grief for what our years of friendship became. But I have healed from that grief within Ashvale's walls, surrounded by people who value truth and careful judgment over convenient assumptions." Marcus nods slowly, turning his attention toward Celine, whose composure has fully collapsed under the weight of her exposed betrayal. "As for you," he says, his voice hardening into the formal tone of alpha judgment, "you will face the consequences appropriate for deception of this magnitude, for allowing an innocent woman to suffer exile while you enjoyed the safety and status your lies protected. This pack does not tolerate such betrayal, regardless of family connection." Celine says nothing further, her guilt too thoroughly exposed for any defense to hold weight before the assembled leaders. Guards move to escort her from the hall, her future within Kane territory now uncertain at best, her carefully constructed position within the pack utterly destroyed by the truth finally brought into the light. As the summit proceedings continue, addressing the formal reversal of Elena's exile and the restoration of her good name throughout the region, Elena finds herself standing steadily beside Damien, grateful for the strength his presence provides during a confrontation that, months earlier, she never could have imagined navigating with such calm clarity. When the formal proceedings finally conclude, various alphas approach Elena and Damien to offer congratulations on their union and acknowledgement of the injustice now properly corrected. Elena accepts these gestures graciously, though her attention remains focused primarily on Damien, whose quiet pride in her strength throughout the difficult confrontation radiates clearly in every glance he directs her way. "You handled that with more grace than I likely would have managed," Damien says softly, once they finally find a quiet moment away from the crowd of well-wishers and curious onlookers. Facing Marcus, hearing Celine's confession, all of it delivered with a composure I found myself deeply proud to witness. "I could not have faced any of it without you beside me," Elena admits, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability now that the tension of the confrontation has finally eased. "Your belief in my innocence, your relentless pursuit of proof, your willingness to claim me publicly, despite the complications it might have created with a rival territory. None of this would have been possible without everything you have done." "You give me too much credit," Damien says, though warmth fills his voice at her words. "The strength that carried you through this entire ordeal, from your initial exile through tonight's confrontation, has always belonged to you alone. I simply provided the resources and support to help that strength find its proper vindication." Elena leans into him, grateful beyond measure for the partnership they have built together, so different from the fragile trust she once placed in Marcus. Trust that ultimately proved unable to withstand a single convenient lie. "Let's go home," she says softly, the word home carrying weight and certainty it did not hold for her only months earlier. The journey back toward Ashvale feels markedly different from their initial journey toward the summit, the tension and uncertainty replaced now with quiet satisfaction and settled peace. Elena watches familiar landscapes pass by, the same forests she once crossed alone, and frightened now feeling entirely different when traveled alongside warriors, loyal to the mate who claimed her, protected her, and fought relentlessly to ensure justice found her, despite the injustice that once threatened to define her entire future. Upon their return to Ashvale, the fortress erupts into genuine celebration, warriors and healers alike gathering to welcome home their king and his mate, whose innocence now stands proven beyond any doubt before the entire region. Elena moves through the joyful crowd with a lightness she has not experienced since long before her exile began, greeting familiar faces, accepting congratulations, finally allowing herself to fully embrace the home she has built within these walls. That evening, as celebrations continue throughout the fortress, Elena finds a quiet moment, alone with Damien, upon the highest balcony of the Great Hall, overlooking the kingdom that has become her home in every sense that truly matters. Stars spread brilliantly across the clear night sky above them, and Elena feels a profound sense of peace settling into her chest as she considers the remarkable journey that brought her to this moment. "I was cast out with nothing," she says softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Accused of a crime I never committed, abandoned by a pack I served faithfully for 11 years, forced to face exile with nothing but the clothes I wore and the herbs I managed to save. I never imagined that journey would lead me somewhere I would come to call home, somewhere I would find not just safety, but genuine love and respect." Sometimes what feels like the ending of everything becomes instead the beginning of something far greater, Damien says, drawing her close against him as they gaze out over the peaceful kingdom below. "You arrived here as a stranger, wrongfully exiled, and you have become essential to everything this kingdom represents, essential to my own life, in ways I never anticipated before you crossed our border." Elena turns to face him fully, her heart full with everything they have built together since that fateful night when rogue wolves chased her across an unfamiliar boundary. "Marcus called me worthless enough to discard without proper investigation. You have shown me, every single day since my arrival, that my worth was never truly in question. It simply required someone willing to see it clearly, without the distortion of convenient assumptions or hasty judgment." "Your worth was never in question," Damien agrees, his voice carrying deep, unwavering conviction. "It simply required someone worthy of recognizing it fully, someone willing to fight for the truth, rather than accepting convenient lies. I consider myself fortunate, beyond measure, that circumstance brought you across my border that night, transforming both our lives in ways neither of us could have anticipated." They remain together upon the balcony as celebration continues below them, two souls who found each other through circumstances neither would have chosen, yet circumstances that ultimately revealed a partnership built on truth, respect, and genuine understanding, standing in stark contrast to the hasty judgment and fragile trust that once defined Elena's life before her exile. The kingdom of Ashvale, once known throughout the region primarily for its ruthless reputation in conflict, now holds within its walls something equally powerful. A queen who arrived as an exile and became beloved for her skill, her resilience, and her unwavering commitment to truth. And Elena Voss, once cast aside by a pack that failed to recognize her true worth, stands now as proof that sometimes the greatest injustices lead, through strength and perseverance, toward futures far more remarkable than anything left behind, a home built not on convenient assumptions, but on the solid, unshakable foundation of genuine love, mutual respect, and truth, finally brought fully into the light.